from NATO's fast air and special operators. To its trench warfare skills in below freezing conditions. The Alliance trains to scramble its capabilities to address an emerging threat on its eastern flank. Exercise Steadfast Dart is the first major deployment of the Allied Reaction Force, defensive drills on the doorstep of a real war in Europe.
Armed forces around the world are watching and learning from the war in Ukraine. Here in neighbouring Romania, this exercise is a reactions test for NATO in case one of its own members needs defending.
Held at very high readiness, 10,000 multinational personnel move on short notice across sea, air and land. This tip of the spear can eventually be reinforced to reach 300,000. Taking the ferry to fight for NATO territory, the UK's 1st Division is leading the land component of the reaction force.
This location just gives us that distance and that little bit more complication to show that our logistics chain, our ability to deploy strategically and operationally works. So the ARF was stood up by the Supreme Allied Commander Europe to be its sort of first responder in the event of any crisis. This exercise is a culmination of well over a year's work towards readiness to show NATO that we're ready to go.
This training area near Galati sits just 16 miles from the border with Ukraine. On the other side, relentless violence shapes how nations view security and how their troops here plan to defend it.
Got several trench complexes constructed on this training area. It gives our troops a really great example of what life may be like. So they're living out them, staying in out overnight, understanding how to administer themselves, how to control that sort of very difficult environment that they're in. And little things from the lowest level, the use of ghillie suits to improve cabin concealment and reduce heat signature. It is getting instruction from our Spanish and French allies who've also harnessed the lessons from Ukraine to develop their own tactics and procedures.
From night to day, from days to months and years, the war in Ukraine has become one of attrition. Efforts to muster this Allied reaction force would be followed by the need to sustain it. There's a demand on medics to keep troops in theatre rather than send them home.
The Ridgeback is a four-wheel twin-axle armoured vehicle. We can take one casualty, as you can see here, on the stretcher, so your big sick patients. We can also potentially take a seated wounded if we haven't got our top gunner, because we usually run a 3 or 4 man crew out of this wagon. So usually sat where I am would be a CMT-1 battles medic. They've gone through the extra course to make sure they can do those big interventions to keep somebody alive, essentially, until we can get them back to definitive care. We have all our monitoring equipment up the top. They'd have an AED, oxygen supply. We'd look to punch out, collect a patient from a non-permissive environment, hence all the armour, and pull them back to a safer sort of semi-permissive environment.
This is actually the medical reception station. So this building essentially is known as a Strata 2. We've got dental, we've got physio, and we've got a pharmacy and the ward attached to us as well.
Strata 3 must be even more advanced again.
So with Strata 3 you have mental health will be attached to us as well.
Oh wow.
There you go. So this essentially what you're stepping into is like a mini ED department. So we have 2 stretchers where we can see 2 patients. This can be scaled up to 4 patients if there's a mass casualty as well.
So the range of treatment you can offer just here actually is huge.
Yeah, so obviously we've got our primary healthcare at the back, but we do see trauma patients and big medical emergency patients. So like things like cardiac arrest, we could actually run it in here.
With the force sustained over 3 months, the drills span Bulgaria and Greece as well as Romania. Military leaders need to know thousands of kilometres won't stop NATO from defending its own when the clock is ticking. Given that some of the British forces, for example, came by ferry, how long do we have in your estimation?
Some elements of it can be deployed faster than others at a very short time, and it also depends on where you have to go. You know, there's air transport, and there are priorities that are made on what you're required first in a specific mission. What we plan with the various components is actually how to arrive and in what order.
What would it take to be the tripwire for a force like this to mobilise?
Certainly when NATO perceives that there is a threat or a crisis to prevent, this is where they would be most likely looking at the RF.
So on the outside of the border or moving in, is this about emerging threat or something that's on the way?
NATO is a defensive alliance, and so normally this is something that requires our own alliance.
NATO's biggest player, the US, hasn't been directly involved on exercise Steadfast Dart. And what message finally does this send in the absence of the US that the European allies can come together and deliver this kind of force?
I like to think that NATO is an alliance at 32, and the message that we continue to remain united and we practice together. All the 32 countries. As I mentioned earlier on, I've got staffs from the United States in my headquarters, so we're all in together. Okay. Thank you very much.
The Allied Reaction Force was established to prevent war as one continued to rage in Eastern Europe. This show of force may have bolstered defences there, but only on NATO land. Tom Sable's BFBS Forces News, Romania. Thanks for watching. For more from BFBS Forces News, like and subscribe to our channel.